and Prof Nixon and Chara. Unfortunately, they're not able to be with us today, but they are the editors. And the book is an initiative of the WITS CLM faculty. It responds to this idea that digitalization is one of the complex critical development and governance structures that we are facing in Africa, and this requires new attention that is transdisciplinary in nature. So in total, we have 15 chapters for a book volume, and they cover a broad range of topics related to Africa's digital transformation. The book is divided into 3 sections. So the first section looks at societal drivers that underpin this transition. The second section looks at analyzing some of the technological trends. And then the third looks closer at governance and governance strategies and approaches. So we're in the latter stages of the book project, and we anticipate publication probably early 2025, maybe late 2024. And if you are interested in learning more about the book, if you're interested in hearing more about the chapters, please visit our YouTube channel to watch our previous lunchbox, which featured 2 of the chapters. So that's a bit of background, and I will hand over to Dr. Mutobi.
Awesome.
Thank you, Amy. Good day, colleagues, and welcome to the Tayarisha Lunchbox series. Today we'll be hearing from Professor Iginio. He is a professor of media studies at the University of Perth. He's the author of The Politics of Technology in Africa and China, Africa and the Future of the Internet. His latest research project examines the international politics of artificial intelligence. He is also participating in the Faculty of Commerce, Law and Management book project titled Africa's Digital Transformation and its Governance, Concepts, Dimension and Perspective. This project is coordinated by Tayarisha. And in today's session, Professor Iginio will be discussing a book chapter that he co-authored with Professor Nicole. The chapter is titled Expanding Geographies of Accountability. How can policymaking in Africa incorporate new energies and contestations emerging in the continent? So, Prof will give you 30 minutes. In this 30 minutes, we'll get your presentation and also some participation from members who are here and those who are online. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you for the introduction. Thank you for including me in the book. As you know, I was ready to join you in person in what looks like a new room. I haven't been in that room yet, but I have 2 out of 3 kids sick with the flu, and so I had to come with a different arrangement. But thank you, Sibusiso, for making it possible to do it today rather than postponing. So I'm not going to have slides. I hope I'm going to have a structured enough presentation so that everybody can follow what I'm going to say. And there is the chapter to back it up. And so if something is not clear, Amy, has been patient in accepting my revision, but the chapter is, I think, basically ready. So, we'll have to wait for December 2024. I think it's more likely to be February 2025, but we'll see. And so just a bit of background. This often happens to me, and my suggestion, my abstract was for a chapter on comparing artificial intelligence policies, but this chapter is completely different. This is not new to me. And when you start engaging with ideas, when you start engaging with a group of scholars, we were lucky to have been able to spend like more than 3 days. Was it 3 or 4 days? I think maybe it was even 4 days. And in the writing retreat and engaging with, especially with Angelo Ndaka, who wrote already a chapter that was touching these issues, I decided to do something different. And it offered me an opportunity to systematize some ideas that had been on the back of my mind, but didn't make it to paper until recently. And the last version was sent to me last week. So I said I will try to be structured. So my presentation follows the structure of the book through 4 different parts. The first one looks at what I define, and this is part of broader work, is in the chapter, but it also resonates with other things I'm doing. The different conjuncture in which, especially African user and African movements, but to some extent also African government and companies in Africa are interfacing with digital technology. What makes this juncture different from previous one? And this is the first part. The second and the third part are the two case studies that are pointing in a similar direction, but they are dramatically different. One is the challenge of content moderators in Kenya, but Kenya is the headquarters of one of these outsourcing company doing content moderation and other tasks for large big tech companies, and moved to one of these companies, to Meta. And the other one is internet shutdown in Uganda. But both cases, it will become clear as I move towards the middle of the presentation, points to a greater confidence, a greater assertiveness by different actors in Africa to take on big tech, to say, it's enough with these geographies of exploitation that builds on imbalances of powers, of skills existing across the world, and different actors from very different perspective taking on these big players. And then towards the end, trying to draw some conclusion and some lessons. I'm an academic. I'm not good at policy making or suggestion for policymakers, but I try to do some of it. So I'm sorry that Geshi is not in the room today, and we can have this conversation whether this is helpful or not. But I guess I was reading the chapter today. I guess there's some good ideas in there. So let me move to part one. Again, I don't have any slides, so you just have to listen to me. So when I say there is a different conjuncture, and this conjuncture is characterized by greater assertiveness, greater also willingness to challenge some of the narratives coming from big tech. Why is so? And I identified three different trajectory, three different forces that make this conjunction different. And again, this conjunction is characterized by, as I said before, greater assertiveness, greater ability to negotiate between different ideas and advance ideas that are distinctive. They are not just following certain ideas of innovation coming from the US or from Europe or from China or from elsewhere. So the first element of this conjuncture I define as experiential, and is basically the users have become tired of being fooled by ideas of liberation technologies and benevolent connectedness, and they've experienced how these narratives contain a lot of fallacies. And one of the distinctive element of these experience I identify in the leaks that have become publicly available over time. So the first one was there are many, but the critical one for these arguments is Francis Haugen's revelation. And in particular, how Francis Haugen illustrated how Meta was very well aware of the consequences of Facebook use in the conflict in Ethiopia, and how the use by different warring faction of Facebook was leading, there are some very famous cases where a professor in Tigray that was killed, was leading to extreme violence against individual and against group, but Meta didn't do much about it or reacted very late when some of the criticism was moved at it. And the second one, which is less dramatic, but for me it's quite indicative, is the leaks by Mark McGann, that used to work for Uber, and showing how Uber started its operation in many different parts of the world. But in the case of Africa, some of these leaks are specific to the African case, and South Africa in particular, where promised ability to be entrepreneurs, to be able to control their own lives, and to make middle class. And these leaks are also illustrating how Uber executives were very well aware of the consequences of some decisions that were taken over time on the livelihood of individuals, in terms of reducing profits that were left for the Uber drivers, or increase in the in the pool of Dryzen and so forth, forcing some of them to work much longer hours to make the same money that they used to make in the beginning, but then they were locked in. So this is just, I can go on with the examples and think in the room and in, you know, in the virtual room and the real room, you know, many of us have similar example of this. So the second element of this conjuncture that make it different is the dramatically different geopolitical situation in which newest digital technologies are spreading around the world. So I don't know if there's someone as old as I am in the room, but you know, I still remember the crackling of the modem in the 1990s when you had to connect to the internet, and that was in the period that just followed the fall of the Berlin Wall and the end of the Cold War. And so this sense of like democracy spreading inevitably in all corners of the world, and the internet became an element of that very project. And today the situation is very different, with a competition between the two major players, China and the US, and we see it in particular with the chip wars when it comes to artificial intelligence and so forth. Unfortunately, in a lot of spaces, this competition is still framed using the lenses of a digital Cold War, and but experience from Africa has no similarities, or very little similarities, with what the Cold War used to be. And so countries had to pledge allegiance to one or the other camps, or say we're not aligned, with specific political consequences. And even if the US is pinning a narrative onto China of a spreader digital authoritarianism, and in the continent, in many countries in the continent, in the African continent, this is perceived very differently. And so actually it's offering new opportunities for negotiation to different actors. And a very interesting, we see it also in Johannesburg when it comes to a safe city, smart city project, a very layered set of infrastructure that builds one on top of the other, one alongside the others, where China and the US and Europe and Africa, when it comes to the companies producing this piece of tech, coexist very easily with one another. And the third one, again, I'm still talking about this conjuncture, is conceptual. So there has been in academia, in quite a bit in the US, but also in other centers of knowledge in the global South, definitely at WITS, at UCTs, different ways to look at innovation and computing. Starting from the 2010s, Lili Rani proposed this idea of post-colonial computing, then followed by decolonial computing, and Mohammed Ali from SOAS, and then new concepts have been suggested, like in terms of like computing from the South, and so this gives new ammunition to look at not just at the opportunities created by digital media, but also at the forms of discrimination, inequalities, and exploitation. So taken together, and we might think of others, but these three look to me quite consistent. They are all big transformation. They offer a potential for a new interfacing of specific actors with what is digital innovation. So it's that we're not believing the stories, the glossy narratives that are coming from the Silicon Valley. We have a lot of partners we can negotiate with, and we don't have to fall for one idea or the other. We can advance our own by connecting with a plurality of actors. And the third one, and these apply mostly to academics, we have different tools that are not like the old digital divide or like liberation technology. We have different ammunition to look at this. So this is from the conjunction. So moving to the second part, and which is the example that the case study that I looked at in the chapter, and it also connects with some other chapters in the edited volume. It has become, I had a long conversation with some of you when we had, definitely with Amy and with Geshe and with other, at the writing retreat, about this case that for me was paradigmatic and really interesting, because it was a case of a digital worker, gig worker, headquartered in Kenya, but coming from all over Africa, including South Africa and Zimbabwe, Ethiopia, and so forth, but especially Southern and Eastern Africa. and how at some point they were employed by a company called Zama before Zama Source, and Zama was contracted by OpenAI to clean up some of the data set that were used to train large language models or to prevent chatbots from producing text that was seen as sexist or derogatory or hateful or misogynist and so forth, or to act as content moderators for the like of Facebook, but also TikTok. And the challenge that was taken by them onto Meta because of the exploitative practices that Meta foisted upon them. And this actually was a South African employee of Zama that started this whole process through unionizing. His name is Daniel Mutanga. But I will get to the details. The details are probably interesting, but not the most interesting part. So their story talks to a problem that is quite deep into even the most let's say radical forms of innovation and most popular and popularized, like large language model, generative AI, and so forth. The fact that there is a process of invisibilization of the human labor, the human force that is needed for the machine to work. So the image of the machine that is produced, that is of this fantastic innovation that works on its own, and also all the conversation on not just on generative AI, but general artificial intelligence takes on even more in that direction. But in order for this shiny piece of tech to work, there is a lot of invisible work that is needed in order to clean the data that is used by large language model to be trained, or when it comes to content moderation, to have a more civil space in which we can hear some other people's idea or advance our own. And when it comes to the example of, these invisible workers exist globally. But when it comes to the global south, there is what has been defined as a colonial supply chain. So the imbalances of power that exist between the centers of power and the poorly skilled group of workers and lack of rights that they have becomes exploited by big companies in order to produce the imagery of radical innovation. The fact that they also, this individual and this group exist at the peripheries sort of helps even more in tuck them away. And I believe, I never tried, we could try, if you go on the street and you ask, what is the human contribution to generative AI, I would expect a lot of people will have no idea. Actually, I had very little idea until I started looking into these contradictions. So another element of these, which makes it even more, I have to find the right word, it's not annoying, but it's because of malicious, maybe, in the question and answer, you will suggest that an adjective is correct. This process of exploitation and extraction was actually couched into a vision, a framework of support to the poorest of the poor. So this is a concept that started in around the 2000, and it's called impact sourcing. So outsourcing is just giving some work away to some other companies. Impact sourcing was actually emerged again in the US and in California as this idea is a kind of a criticism towards aid. Aid is patronizing. Aid is ties certain societies to dominance of power, which is true. But as a replacement to aid, impact sourcing was based on giving dignified work to the poorest of the poor. So we are actually, and you can imagine like someone like Zama going to like the boardrooms of the like of Google or Facebook and saying, we can actually help poor people in Africa and with this work. So we're helping, lifting certain groups that are out of a job through the work that we're giving. And these narratives, and that's, that's what the Kenyan case is not just a case. Daniel Mutang and then the followers, the other workers that were with him, possibly inadvertently put a stop to this narrative and say the work that we are given is not dignifying in any remote ways. Is the working condition in which we are in a way, not dehumanizing would be too strong, but they definitely don't fit into the description of a work that has dignity. And the reason, again, there is the whole chapter to go into this, but are many going from the fact that for me is the least important, but it received quite a bit of attention. So what the Zama source does is it uses a form to calculate the minimum wage. And this is sort of supported by big companies like the ILO and so forth. And they say we are working at a level that is slightly higher to what workers would expect. And we don't go higher because we don't want to disrupt the market. But because of Daniel Mutang revelation, and also there was a great reporting by Billy Perigo on Time, it was shown that actually Zama source went against its own principle that was widely publicized to give, workers were paid less than what Zama said they will be paid because of competition, because this market had become increasingly competitive. There are others, and again, that is one. But the second one that is for me is worse is all of the decision that had to be made. So imagine like there is a snippet of text or an image had to be made in a very limited time span, around 30 seconds, for a working day of 10 hours. So imagine yourself sitting in front of a computer, closely monitored by one of these I don't call it workload surveillance system. So whether or not they can see whether or not you're working or not, and make decision constantly, 30 second after 30 second, from 8 o'clock in the morning until 6 o'clock in the afternoon. And these, I probably wouldn't survive a day or two in that kind of condition. So that was very far from dignified. And then the straw that broke the camel's back when it's related to Facebook in particular is that a lot of these workers were asked to make a decision whether or not to take down content, including rape, beheading, and videos that were very gruesome, and some of them developed post-traumatic stress disorder. So at that point, a group of these workers decided to go, I don't know how much I can go into the details because this is interesting but less interesting. So I think that the broader framework, the framework of exploitation and presenting work as dignifying when it's actually the opposite of it. And some of these workers decided to unionize and go against Facebook. And against Zama. As a result of it, Daniel Mutang was fired. And thanks to a group of NGOs, one is Foxglove in the UK, is pro bono lawyers that work with for digital workers in the gig economy. Again, journalists like Billy Perigo. The case was brought to a national and then global attention. And Meta and first Zama was taken to court as a result of this, and of course Facebook and also Facebook was framed as a part in this case because it was the company that outsourced these specific tasks to Zama, and the content was ultimately coming from Facebook. Zama was just an intermediary, and Facebook fell back on his usual playbook. So we don't have any legal representation into Kenya, and so we are not responsible for the case that is being brought to Zama. So again, you see the hypocrisy of big tech in this particular case. So the content is ours. It helps our company to be viable, to be Facebook is not that successful anymore. But anyways, to have that kind of minimum standard of civility that allows to it, but we're not. And I'm moving towards the conclusion of these because I also see the time is against me. And in a very unprecedented move, the Kenyan courts, I always try to resist using the words taking side because they didn't take side. They acted as courts. They scrutinized the case. And they recognize Facebook as the true employers this content moderators. And if this is confirmed, the case is ongoing. You know, I was in touch with Amy because I'm waiting. I want to, when the chapter is out, I want to write the end of the story, of the end of these stories. And this is unprecedented. So it would be the first time that Facebook claim of irresponsibility. I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not using the proper language, but I guess you get what I'm trying to say. Will be challenged. So even if Facebook doesn't have an office, is not an entity that is legally recognized in Kenya, but this would apply also for any other country, it's seen as responsible and the true employers for these workers. And these can have consequences well beyond Kenya. And I cite in the chapter one of the interviews of one of the content moderators that is still involved in this case, and is sort of mindful of the Communist International. Well, like you know, workers unite, and we content moderators play an important role, and we have to go beyond our idiosyncrasies or our national interests because our role and game is larger. So I will try to speed up and to the second case, which is dramatically different, but it tells a similar story. So this one is about an internet shutdown. I'm just going to have a sip of water between one case and the other. So this is an internet shutdown by the Ugandan government. Well, actually, it was a partial shutdown. It was the Ugandan government shutting down Facebook for 6 months, just before and after the Ugandan election in January 2021. And this is a different story. It's not workers uniting. Yoweri Museveni, and a leader that used to be inspired in the era of his liberation struggle, and probably in the first 2 terms in office, but now turned as a despot, doesn't want to leave office, and following others' example. But it's interesting because it tells a similar story when it comes telling big tech to be accountable for action that have consequences for a country's political life, Uganda, but companies have denied any responsibility. So Facebook has a very important role, and Twitter and TikTok, a lot of these social networking platform, in the way that not they directly interfere by producing content, but allowing specific type of content to become more visible and therefore more influential. So what happened, I have to read here. So just in January 2021, Facebook took down 32 pages, 220 users account, 59 groups, 139 Instagram profile linked to the Ugandan government and the ruling National Resistance Movement. So only the government camp was affected. And as a result of it, Yoweri Museveni and minister and so forth decided, well, you know what, we're just going to take you down because of what you have done. And this move was strongly condemned, and it's rightly so. And as we know, an internet shutdown violates freedom of expression and has a lot of consequences and economic cost on already fragile economy. And usually when an internet shutdown happens, the kind of reaction stops at that. It's kind of a condemnation that fits into the narrative of the autocrat that is abusing its power in order to prevent or to advantage a group against the other. But what is not being asked, and we ask in this chapter and also elsewhere, is why internet shutdown actually happened. And this goes to, again, and it connects with the previous case, to the uneven relationship between social networking platform with more powerful and less powerful countries. So, and these have very practical repercussions. So if you are Germany, you are probably, if you're a German user, you're probably navigating a version of Facebook for which a lot of money have been spent in order to allow content moderation of a higher standard. If you live in Uganda, that's not the case. As Francis Hagen said, the people in the most conflict-prone countries in the world are also the one that use the worst version of the platform because not as much money is invested in it. And the second one is the capacity of national government to speak, to be able to reach out to Facebook and demand explanation and receive, arguments of why certain things have been done. And then the other one, maybe I'm going to skip that one because I see that time is like. So the quality of content moderation, again, I just go back to what I've said already in the case of the Ethiopian civil war, and where now publicly available through, for instance, Augen and Facebook having very clear sense, or some people within Facebook, of what was happening and the role of the platform, but not being able to do very much about it. And the second aspect is the ability to interface with big tech. And if you are the German chancellor and you pick up the phone, you're likely to have Mark Zuckerberg on the other side and explaining why they did what they did. But if you are like, you were Museveni or Abiy Ahmed, and is less likely that the same channel of communication will be open. And here I go, and then I think I will stop and then draw the conclusion to what actually happened and why asking why an internet shutdown happens is important. So for the NRM, for Museveni's party and his allies, basically what Facebook did is Facebook took sides and taking down certain pages and users and not others. So what happened is Facebook and Twitter, just before the election, received information about inauthentic behavior from a fact-checking organization that is recognized and is closely tied and has been collaborating and working with Facebook in the past. So he's a trusted flagger. And as a result of it, Facebook took down these pages. But when we interviewed some of the members of this organization, that we can't reveal what it is or who they are, say, well, things were moving very quickly and we didn't have time to look at the opposition. So the reason why the certain were taken down and not others is simply because a kind of skewed focus onto some actors as compared to others. And here I just want to cite the words of a Ugandan official that explain actually in very vivid ways what the government was trying to do, and the fact that the opposition was better at the government at disinformation, and they were seen like we should learn from them. So I'm just going to read very briefly, and then so Facebook deactivated the account of people who were pro-government or pro-NRM. The opposition were playing dirty in terms of content, but also incitement and insult. Opposition activists were ahead. The NRM crowd decided to fight back. When we squared up with them on bad language, so it's basically saying the government wanted to play as dirty as the opposition. They were better. We became as good at them at playing dirty. Our team was targeted. There was a lot of debate before this dirty trick team was set up. When Facebook targeted pro-NRM accounts, the government felt attacked, so they decided to shut down Facebook. The measure was a hit back. Facebook was seen as playing dirty. So it's much more complex that, as you can see, of the simple narrative of an authoritarian leader say, well, if you have to go back to a level playing field, we have to take these measures. But also because, and again, the details are in the chapter, the government first tried to ask Facebook why that was the case, present different evidence, but there was absolute silence from the side of Facebook. So moving to the third part, and so trying to draw different things together. I'm just going to read again a couple of sentences just because they're in front of me. And the two cases discussed in the chapter in the presentation are significantly different, and this is obvious. One is a spontaneous bottom-up response to a form of exploitation emerging from individuals who felt deprived of their right and dignity and found possibly unexpected support both in local institutions, Kenyan unions and courts, and international activists network. The other is a unilateral top-down decision by an increasingly despotic authority, taking advantage of a growing and widespread criticism of big tech and the normalization of internet shutdown to turn frustration and impotence towards a greater but distant power into reassertion of influence and control of a confined community. Taken together, however, they signal a changing trend in how African citizens, laborers, and institutions are interfacing with processes and practices of digital innovation. So this is where I get to this idea of expanding geographies of accountability. So we have been used to praise the European Union as an institution that managed to stand up to the power of big tech. And this has been happening for decades since the first sentence or decision against Microsoft to unbundle the Internet Explorer that I guess nobody's using anymore. I think it exists anymore from Microsoft Windows and continue to these days. But this also shows a kind of new ability and new assertiveness to resist these forms of exploitation and extraction in ways that are more informal, but also comes from the very periphery, saying these companies have to be held accountable for the responsibility and roles, both when it comes to the labor market, when it comes to political influence. And they can't just simply get away with these ideas that we are not content producer, we're not editors, we're simply intermediaries, and we can't be held responsible for our actions. So this is changing, and these can have wide-ranging consequences. The final one, I think, is a bit complex. I don't know if I have time to go into it. Is about different idea of sovereignty that this refers to. So the first, in the case of the Kenyan moderators, point to the idea of sovereignty as we define in the paper as recognition. So the ability of being recognized for the value of the work. You know, we don't want to be invisibilized worker, but also recognition of the set of rights that certain workers can have in specific jurisdiction. So Kenya is much stronger when it comes to unionizing than other places in the world, and the ability of these companies to recognize that element. And the second one, and here follow Achille Mbembe, the Museveni's move is still an assertion of sovereignty, but sovereignty in this case is seen as a fetish. And Achille Mbembe is quite provocative but quite strong, that says post-colonial state have been obsessed with this idea of sovereignty, even if it was foisted on them by colonial powers. And in the end, this idea of sovereignty is a zero-sum game. You can see Museveni sort of acting on an imbalance of power in big tech, and so something that a lot of people would like to see more. But the result of it, users within Uganda are worse off because they don't have the ability to exercise the freedom of expression or to learn information or make money out of these different companies. I guess I will stop that. There's so much more content, but I'm totally out of time, and I would love to have a conversation with you guys. And there is a chapter there at some point to look at. Thank you.
Thank you very much for an informative presentation on big tech, and I think labor markets, political issues that I think squares well with some of work on future of work. And conflict resolutions among big tech and political political issues. So it's time for participants to participate and raise questions, discuss the issues that have been raised during this particular presentation. So those who are online, if you have a question, you can raise your hand via the digital thing, and then those who are physically can also do that. So I'll give those who are here time to, if they have questions, to raise their questions or comments. Or clarity if you don't understand something. Online, do you have questions?
I don't see any hands so far. Some smiling faces, but
Okay. I think that in the absence of questions, for me, I will just have some few things to say. I think the presentation is very interesting. you know, it goes, like I was saying, to some of the work on the future of work, where we some researchers have looked at issues of workers' rights. I'm surprised that you didn't look at the issue of Uber, which I believe it will provide more issues on the right of workers, especially when they work on digital platform services. And it also talks to the issue of the non-taking of responsibilities of big tech. So when there are issues, and also talks to issues of of rights. And yeah, I think that's one thing I can say. Otherwise I can say there's some work that we did right on the issues of workers' rights, and it's called future of work, to look at workers' rights within the Uber platforms. And you also talked about something that I think is very interesting. That would be the issues of discrimination within the platforms. For instance, there is much of work, or I mean, say what we call micro work, or online digital platforms that hire people. But when you look at it, it seems like there are some issues of discrimination there, in terms of even when you set up a profile, you find that most of the profile, they would prefer to be Indian kind of looking profile than to have a black person, because if we are black, we are not likely to be.
Is it me that I lost them, or they lost connectivity? Anybody else? Okay.
I don't know if
I lost you for like 10 seconds. I think they're still missing you.
You are still not up in the big screen, but I hope you.
Yeah, I got most of it. Now you're frozen, but can you say something again? I don't think it's me.
Oh, okay, I'm done with my questions. Okay.
Right. Can you hear me? Is it me? I don't know if there's anybody online that. Can you guys hear me? I'm reconnected again because I see that the image is frozen, but I could hear you.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, perfect. So no, Uber is a great case, and again, we have 8,000 words, and I think there is a great work by the late Eddie Webster and Fikile Mazikane. I remember that report that they wrote. That was I Drive to Survive, I believe, and I think it's some of you guys were involved in it, and that is very powerful, and it tells a very similar story. And definitely these things resonate. So if we have a larger space to write, related chapters, one of them on Uber will definitely be a strong case and a strong example. So I don't know, guys. I guess only the online people are left in the room, because I guess we lost the Tayarisha core. And unless any of you have question here in the room, I think we can just take it. Hello? I don't know, Caitlin, Tandeka, Jasmine, you are with me online, and
yes, it sounds
if you have
like
any question, I can
echo.
jump on it. Otherwise, we can. Oh no, some people are back. Yeah, I remember the School of Governance some issues with the connectivity. You should.
Yeah. In the absence of questions, I think it's for us to say thank you very much for the presentation, a very well informative presentation, and that will be the end of the session today.
Cool. I hope to be in person with you guys for the following ones. and things will be easier on my end. But pleasure to present the chapter, and it was a good chance to stretch some ideas.
Thanks, Prof. So I think before you just want to thank you once again for coming through, and we're wishing your kids a speedy recovery. Thank you again for that flexibility to be part of.
I'm gonna go and check on them just now.
Yes. And then so we'll just update the rest of the colleagues, and then we'll close. So you are welcome to drop out of the call and then just go check on the kids.
Fantastic.
But we're looking forward to probably a book launch at some point once it's done. I think in this particular series of the book chapters from the CLM book, we will have one more presentation from one of the other authors. We are looking to have Dr. Angela and Daka coming through to present, but we'll send out details relating to that. So we're also looking to have her present her chapter to our community. So we'll send out an invite to that, and then we'll just make this and all this session and all our other sessions available on our Tayarisha website. I do have like a few updates.
So I'm going to leave you at this point, because I guess for you guys. Hopefully see you next time when Angela is presenting. All the best.
Awesome. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Cheers. Okay, so yeah, our updates are we have the Tayarisha podcast up now, thanks to some of our colleagues here for assisting us with uploading that. So go have a listen. It's available on Spotify. And then we have the CTI, and I always say CTI conference. It's called the CTIF conference coming up, and I think we've shared the links to that on our chat. Go and register, attend the conference. You will thank me later. And then we also have the IceGov conference taking place in October. We'll also share the links to that, and I think our next Lunchbox series will be on the 5th of September. That invite will go out pretty soon. We're just confirming a few details, and we will share that with colleagues. Thank you so much, colleagues, for joining us. We look forward to hosting you on our next Tayarisha Lunchbox series. Have a good afternoon. Cheers and bye.